Start with John Krause.
Hey, Brad. In all the time I've been around, I haven't seen you with a phone in your hand. And then the first cutaway in Las Vegas, there you are with the phone in your hand. How has the adjustment been to this job? How is it compared to your expectations?
It's a great question. The phone. So that was a good observation, kind of back to, in a lot of ways, some of the things that we had in the college level, right? So, but it's, as far as the expectations of the job, I knew it was going to be a sprint right now with, everything that we had to do this summer. And so we still have a lot of work to do, just generally, some around the edges with the roster and some around, making sure that now we can focus on some other things from an operational standpoint. So there's a lot to do. The phone rings a lot, but it's all good. And, it's been quite an adjustment and quite, again, a full sprint since the season ended.
Mark Murphy.
Hey, Brad. With the signings you've made and so forth, what is your picture for this upcoming season? I mean, initially it looked like you guys were playing for 2022 in terms of having flexibility. You've signed Marcus to a 4-year extension. Just what is your picture of this year and where you go heading into next summer?
Well, obviously, we want to be a good team. I think that we've been fortunate to add some guys that can really play. I mean, I think that that's a positive, and I think that we're in a good position from the big picture standpoint. I can't comment on some of the stuff that you said about Marcus yet, but obviously, what Marcus has meant to winning here, and I think that that's been very obvious that ever since he's been here, we have been a good basketball team. I think that last year, with all the different injuries and the uniqueness of the season, the quick turnaround, I do think that there is that team last year was probably a little better than we played. Obviously, we improved our coaching and we added a couple of really good players. And so I'm excited about this year's group. I think one of the things that Danny always did a really good job of is, he didn't ever try to put a ceiling on us, and I would never try to do that with this year's group, but we certainly feel good about the group as we head into the year, barring any unforeseen changes, and are looking forward to also what we're going to be able to do down the road.
Gary Washburn.
Hey, Brad, you just said that you improved the coaching. You're a humble guy, and I expect you to say that. And you make every opponent look like, you make Army look like Alabama when you talk about opponents. But in reflection of last year, were you a little tired? Did you feel like you somehow fell short of what you wanted to do with the guys? And how has that affected how you've approached this offseason in your new job?
I think like every other year, Gary, the challenge, and you say the Army Alabama analogy, I think the reality is when you're in it, it's really freaking hard to beat a team. And I know that it's easy to kind of look at it from the 10,000 foot view, but like all these teams have good players, all these teams have really good coaches, and a lot has to be done to win a basketball game. And the minute you don't bring your A game in this league, you're going to get beat. And I think that's the reality of it. But like any other year, there are always things that I would look back on and say, there are things that I could have done a lot better. There are things that we did pretty well. And there are things that you wish you would have done differently. But I wouldn't say that it was unlike most years of reflection after the fact. I think the biggest thing that I've felt as we've moved forward is, I want to be a team that, and we've talked about this before, that Boston can really get behind, that plays with a great edge, that plays with the grit and toughness that's necessary to compete at the very, very high. I think Ime and his staff will do a great job of coaching to that. And I think that, we have a lot of players that have proven themselves as competitors. And I think that that's exciting. And so we'll see where it all shakes out. But as far as me and how last year affected this summer or anything else, I've just tried to keep my head down and try to do the role that I'm in as well as I can. Certainly not perfectly. And I don't think that this will be without its hiccups, but I do think that, we're really focused on trying to be the best version of ourselves for Boston.
Brian Robb.
Hey, Brad. Just wanted to get your thoughts on, again, we haven't talked to you since the Josh Richardson trade and a couple of the other, and the Dennis signing in. So your thoughts on those guys, and are you happy with the roster construction heading into camp now, or are you guys still looking at making additional potential tweaks, whether that's via trade or free agency?
Well, obviously we have 16 players on the roster right now. And so most tweaks would be around the edges via potential moves, but there's nothing imminent and there's nothing that I think is a certainty by any means. We'll continue to monitor that and discuss those things as we go through the next few weeks. And then we'll continue to monitor that as we go through the first part of the season. As far as, I'll just talk one at a time about those guys, but being able to get Josh in the sign and trade and use that exception, I thought was heading into free agency, our biggest opportunity with the resources that we had going in to make sure that we solidified ourselves, and I think that Josh brings a great grit, again, an edge. He can defend several positions. I think that last year was a little bit of an anomaly in how he shot the ball. He's always been a good shooter, and our numbers would say that when he gets the open opportunities, he's better obviously than he shot last year, but he wants to win. Like, winning is really important to him. I think the way he separated himself when he joined the league, right, with being a mid-second round pick, was he showed his competitive character out of the gate. And I think that is something that we're looking forward to adding to our team. And then Dennis, I think we were really fortunate. We obviously were very cognizant of what we had from a resource standpoint in free agency. And Dennis was a guy that, if you would have asked me on the first 2 days, it'd probably be unlikely that we would be able to be in play for him. But he is, again, super edge, super competitor, is a guy that can impact the game, at so many levels and plays both ends of the court. And so those guys are, they just give us a lot of flexibility. Ime will figure out how everybody fits together. But we've got with those guys and Marcus and Jalen and Jason and Al and Rob, you've got, 7 proven guys that have been able to play, at a starter and finisher level. And so that's exciting.
John Corrales.
Brad, with the Evan Fournier sign and trade there, can you walk us through how that went? Was the intent originally to bring him back? And once he decided to go to New York, what was the pivot, and why is it so important to have that traded player exception here moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, we really liked Evan. We talked to him, with where we were and where he was. He chose a different option. And but he's a good player, and you saw that. Obviously before he came to Boston, during his time in Boston, he had some really good moments. Although I don't think anybody got to see the true Evan because of his bout with COVID, and then I thought that there were just challenges, and that he'll continue to have a really good career. We got, one of the reasons why we had targeted Josh as a potential person to use in that exception to give us options. And so when we were able to get Josh, that gave us the options again to look at how we wanted to structure it financially moving forward. But we did engage with Evan, and again, he chose the offer that he wanted to, and that's his right. And kudos to him, and he's a good guy, and he'll do well. But and then from the standpoint of the traded player exception, excuse me, we just thought that being able to again open up more space to be able to take in, whether it's one salary, whether it's several salaries, whatever the case may be, if we want to, the more flexibility we have, the better.
Jared Weiss.
Two quick questions to follow up on that last point. A lot of teams seem to be favoring trade exceptions over trying to create cap space. I'm curious what you think of that as a team that seems to be taking that route. And then also, now that you're in this GM role, how is evaluating other NBA players changed for you when instead of evaluating them and how you're trying to stop them as a coach, you're evaluating them and how they could possibly fit for you as part of your team?
Well, I think that might be the uniqueness of me moving into this role. Is my first thought is, how much did I fear them? How much do I think they could impact the game when I'm coaching against them? So maybe that's a different viewpoint than people that, have other viewpoints. And so I think that we've had good discussion about that as we have continued to talk about people that we're interested in. But, and then as far as the traded player exception, you just try and create different avenues to give yourself options. That's the bottom line. And, not everything is, this is complicated stuff from a number standpoint, but I think that we do have some flexibility and some options, which is good. And we've got good players. And so we've got a good foundation, and that's exciting as well.
Keith Smith.
Brad, you talked about grit and toughness with a couple of the additions, and then bringing Al back. How much was creating a team that is maybe more defensive minded again and switchable on defense and things like that with Horford and Dunn and Richardson and those guys?
Well, I think and then obviously Schroder is can play above his height and is a pest when he picks up, and when he gets into the ball, he's as disruptive as you can be. And so I think that, obviously there's two sides of the ball. To win a game, you got to play both sides well. To be a great team and a team that's in the mix, you should probably be in the top 5 or 6 on both sides. And, we'll see where we land when we get together and how we play and how we fit together and everything else. But we have a lot of good players, and that's exciting. And we want to be able to be versatile. We want to be able to play different ways. And we were, fortunate to add those guys. And then, and as you said, Al is a guy that gives you some flexibility as well, where you can play big, and he can stretch the floor. He can play small, and he can be a ball handler and a person you play through and those type of things. And the basket's wide open because fives have to guard him. He just gives you a lot of options. So I think that that's a real positive as well. And, when I talked about and obviously the other guy that we added that you haven't asked about is Dennis. And so there's another proven guy that we were really fortunate to get when you consider the market. And, he was here a couple of years ago, and his ability to change a game with his rebounding and his scoring, is pretty unique. And so, again, we feel fortunate to add who we were able to add. and hopefully that gives us some versatility to play different ways, but also some different options for Ime and his staff.
Brian, Rob.
Brad, you talked about the trade exceptions earlier, and I think you guys are right around the tax line right now. Do you have the green light to add more salary this year, for the right player and go into the tax? I know given the penalties involved there, is that something you have that flexibility?
Yes. Yep.
Sui Chitarada.
That's one of the reasons why, Brian. It's one of the reasons why, Brian, we didn't want to, with our exceptions being what they were, we didn't want to hard cap ourselves.
Cool. Yeah, Brad, just wondering what the summer league experience was for you as a front office member, and what did you see out of maybe that team and some of the international products you guys have drafted the past 2 years?
Well, I was really encouraged by our summer league team. I thought Joe did a great job with the team. Joe and a lot of our staff members that we've added, a couple that we picked up for summer league, they really did a good job, coaching that team. And then I thought, the players, led by the people that have been on our roster, like Carson and, Peyton and Romeo and Aaron, all did a really good job. I thought Bruno was obviously a great addition. When he was able to join the team and gave us a different look with his ability to get to the rim. I thought Sam had some really good moments and obviously will be around as our new two-way contract. And then I thought Yam, before he got hurt, gave us a good presence and kind of a game-changing presence defensively and with his activity. He has a flair to his game and a skill that's fun. And I think he'll continue to grow and be a good player. And then I thought Juhan did a lot of really good things. He was cutting, he was active. He was probably our best verticality at the rim defender. He's a strong guy that's hard to go through and pretty encouraging for a super young guy that, has a bright future ahead.
All right. Last couple of questions for Brad. We'll go to John Krause.
I have a couple. First, what is the plan for Yam and Yuhan? Are they sticking around somehow or going back? And secondly, is there an advantage to operating as an over the cap team as opposed to trying to clear cap space? You seem to have the flexibility at one point to go either direction, and you're now going to be an over the cap team. What's the advantage moving forward operating that way?
Well, I think number one, the idea right now with both Yam and Juhan with our current roster constraints are for them to play, overseas, and they both have their teams and where they will be, and we think they're really good situations. We think they're going to do great, and we're going to be over there quite a bit. And because I think they're both guys that you could see being really impactful sooner rather than later. Both guys that we're excited about. And then from the standpoint of, over the cap, under the cap, creating cap space, clearing all that stuff up, I just think there's so many different ways to do this. And what you want are options. You want flexibility. But if you're going to be over the cap, you want to be over the cap because you've got good players. And so we're fortunate that, again, when you look at the guys that we have, and, I mentioned specifically those guys that are back that have been hugely impactful, but the new guys we brought in, there's, I think that's what we're looking for. We want to make sure that we, are smart about what we're doing. And at the same time, we want to make sure that, our really good players feel valued and know that they're really important to us and that, we're excited about them.
Final question, Gary Washburn.
Hey, Brad, what's the outlook? How are you looking? You have a second two-way to sign. What's the evaluation process in that? And are you comfortable with this roster as it stands now? 5 weeks or whatever, or 6 weeks before training camp begins? Or will you try to tweak some things?
Well, like I said earlier, we're always going to be listening, looking, thinking, but that's more around the edges, probably, Gary, right? I think that, I do think that if we go into training camp today, I feel good about our flexibility. I feel good about the different ways we can play. I feel good about our depth. And if we do that, we're going to need, one or two of our young guys to step up, right? Step up the way they did in summer league and carry that forth as we move forward here. The two-way deal, we're actively looking at the field for our second spot right now, but we don't feel like we have to make that decision right now. I mean, there's so many roster moves and changes and tweaks that are going to come across the 30 teams in the next, few weeks. And then even when we get into training camp, as people decide and make final cuts and those type of things. So we have our eyes on some, but we're not holding ourselves to necessarily a timeline with that. We are excited. I think Sam did a good job, and Sam will be a guy that will benefit from playing in Maine and doing different things that help him grow his game, especially on the defensive end. But he's a guy that you'll be able to throw in with our best players, and he can play a role around them, in Boston. And so that's a good thing too, with his size and with his ability to shoot the ball. So we're excited about him, and we don't feel like we're in a ton of a rush. One of the things that we did talk about, and I'm rambling here, but we're also just trying to see how our roster looks and what maybe our needs would be with that second spot.
All right. We'll wrap it up right there. Thanks, Brad.
All right, everybody. Have a great day.